we're going to start some Unity stuff. I've noticed lots of people don't really know where to start when it comes to developing your own games and stuff like that. So I thought I'd do a series of videos just kind of going through stuff, and we're going to make a game from start to finish. Very small game, but it will be a game, and hopefully it'll get you started on kind of going along, doing your own stuff, and stuff like that. So first thing you're going to want to do is go to the Unity website and get Unity. It's free. There's also the professional version, which is obviously paid and it's expensive, so get the personal one. I think that's what it's called. It just recently they gave pretty much everything that the pro version does in this version, the personal version. So you know, you're not losing anything or anything like that with this. Alright, so once you download it, you don't need to worry really about text editors. I think Unity comes with Visual Studio. Yeah, it comes with Visual Studio now, not the really bad mono-develop that it used to come with. So it should download Unity, and then it will install Visual Studio for you, and just go through all that, and then once you're done installing everything, it should pop up with something like this, except you won't have these projects here. These are just things that I mess around with in Unity. So once you come to here, it should open up with projects, or you'll need to make an account and stuff like that. Just go through that and whatever, and then you can go to getting started, and it has this little intro video for you, but we're not gonna go into that. So once you open up Unity, what you're gonna want to do is just basically you can see I'm signed in here. So if you have any projects existing and they're not showing up, you can always go into here and open them and find the folder and whatever. But we're gonna go with new, and it should come to this. So when Unity originally came out, it was only 3D. There was no 2D framework because Unity is a 3D engine. So the 2D is a bit, it's not perfect, but it'll work for now. So we're gonna go with 2D. Asset packages. I think this is included now. If not, I'll look it up after this video, and if it's not, then I'll add it in the description. You can download it and just install it. Basically, it makes it a lot easier to use Visual Studio with Unity. And there's also a bunch of different stuff, like effects is pretty cool. We'll go over that maybe sometime. And then generally, the rest of this is kind of for 3D stuff. iTween, you won't have that. It's basically just a animation system that I have for the camera. Basically, that's all I use it for. But yeah, so 2D, if this isn't here, don't worry about it. You don't really need it for this. And then your location of your project, mine just gets dumped into my documents. And then your project name, I'm just going to do this as YouTube tutorial. You can name it whatever you want, doesn't really matter. Just kind of, keep it so like underscores and capitals and stuff doesn't really matter. And then once you have this set up, create project. And I'm not entirely sure how quick the loading time for me will be today. Hopefully it is not too long. It looks like it's booting up here. I hope. It's just loading in all the assets. Alright, so it is on my top monitor, but I will drag it down as soon as it's done loading. Alright, so your Unity probably won't look like this. The windows will be laid out differently. You might have the game and the scene on the same page. Basically, you can drag the tabs around and basically set it up however you want. Stuff like that. My icons are big and I don't usually have them like that. Okay, so it should turn out like this. You'll have this rectangle with a little camera in the middle. You can, up here, turn off 2D and you'll be in a 3D space now, but we're doing 2D, so we'll just leave it like that. 3D is generally, you know, if you want to go into 3D and kind of set, you know, layer different images, that'd be good for that, but I'll show you how to do that without having to do that. In your hierarchy, you'll have the main camera, and you know, there's different stuff here. We'll just go with solid color, and the style that I'll be using for this game is pretty simple. So, and then orthographic is just the 2D kind of facing one direction camera. Perspective would be 3D, and you can have like a field of view and stuff, but our size will be 10, basically the same thing. You can have your camera size to whatever you want. I just like having mine at 10 because it's a bit easier for me to work with. Depth, you can leave all this the same pretty much. Render textures, don't have to worry about that. Display target, don't have to worry about that. So yeah, just leave the main camera because that's what's going to render the game. If you don't have a camera, your scene will be empty. So if you go, so that's the scene. You can move stuff around in here, and we'll go over that more. This is the game view. So as you can see, I have a custom resolution here. It's 1024 by 576, which is a multiple of 1280 by 720. And that's just it. I just have it like that because it fits in the little view here. If you have a big monitor, then it's probably easier for you to go 1280 by 720. But it also is a performance thing within the engine. If I have it at a smaller scale, then it will be less taxing on my computer. And then you have free aspect, which is the full, you know, it'll fill up the entire thing no matter where your window, how big your window is, and it's always the edge here. 5x4, 4x3, which is pretty much all of Lambier games are in 4x3. 3x2, 16x10, and 16x9. So the most common ones are 16x9, so that's like 1280 by 720 and 1024 by 576. And then 4x3 is this one, standalone. It's 1024 by 576, but we're going to go with a 1280 by 720 resolution today. Okay, so what we'll start by doing is saving a scene. So basically, if you hit Control S or you just go, you know, File, Save, Scene, it'll bring up something like this. And what you can do is if you go down to your project view, it should have this in it if you have the Unity Visual Studio tools. You can right-click in here and go create a folder, and you can call it Scenes. And then we can hit Control S again, and now your Scenes folder will show up in here. And there's nothing in there yet, but we can just call this, we'll just call it Game, because this will be where, you know, our character moves around and such. And then we'll have a different one for menu, where we might just have the menu in the exact same area, or in the same scene. So there's your scenes. Now we're going to set up a few more folders, so I'll just create, I want to make a scripts folder. I also want to create a sprites folder. Prefabs, which is basically when you make an object, add scripts to it and all that different stuff. It's called a prefab, and you can save it so you don't have to create the same object over and over again. And then sounds maybe. Yeah, okay, that should be good for now. All right, so what we want to start doing, excuse me. What we want to start doing is create an object that moves around, and you know, you can actually do stuff with. So first, what I want to do is I'm going to go into the scripts, and I'm going to make a C# script. Now you'll see that you have JavaScript and a shader. I guess they took out BooScript. I didn't realize that, but I've never even looked into BooScript, so there's really no point in talking about it. But anyway, I use C#. You can use JavaScript. They're pretty similar in syntax. You know, if you go to the Unity, the help stuff, you can look at it in JavaScript or C#, and generally a lot of people do it in JavaScript because it's a bit easier. It's also very messy, so I don't like using it. So we're going to use C#. It's, you know, you can use whatever you'd like, but we're going to be doing it in C#. So we'll call this player controls, and this is basically going to control the player's movement and input. So what we can do is that just it just compiled. You'll see a little, and we're gonna open this up really quick, and I'll be right back because Visual Studio takes a second to load. All right, so now we have Visual Studio open. Visual Studio looks like this, pretty much. It's the, I don't know what version it is, like whether it's the community version. I'm assuming it's the community version, which is basically just a free text editor that Microsoft has. I think they just made it free anyway, or they, you know, gave the rights to Unity or whatever. So anyway, this is actually, make this bigger real quick so you guys can see it a bit better and won't have to hear about it. Okay, so this is how a script in C# will be laid out once you open it up in Visual Studio. This is your class name. Don't change that. It'll be the same as whatever you named it in your folder. So if you change the name of it in here, so if you change the name of this from player controls to something else, then you need to change this as well. Otherwise, it won't read it, and it thinks it's a different script that doesn't actually exist. So you have your start here, which is the start function. Is it basically runs every time the script is either placed in the game or whenever the game is started. So if this object exists in the game when you start the game, then this will run right away, unless you put a delay on it. But we'll talk about that later. And update is every frame. So every time, say your game is 60 frames per second, this will run 60 times a second, which is where we'll put most of our movement stuff. Okay, so I don't like having my curly braces set up like this. As you can see, they're at the end of each line. So if you hit Control K and then Control D separate times, they will get laid out like this. And this is generally how I have my stuff. And as long as you have a curly brace and an ending curly brace where they're supposed to be, doesn't really matter where they are. So we're going to start out with a few variables. We're going to do a public float move speed. So public is basically, it can be shared between scripts. So if I made another script and I wanted to change this in that script, I could simply access that variable with a bit of code, which is probably something we'll get into. So once you have that, just Control S, or save it up here. There's a little icon. You save it, go back into here, and the little wheel will turn in the bottom right corner to let you know that's compiling. And now you have this, and you can see your variable in there. And we're going to create a couple of objects. We're going to create a cube. And you can see the cube is there. And it's going to look really odd because of the color and stuff. But don't worry about that. So if you go into the object, it says cube. You can change the name. So we'll just change the name to player. And you can see the tag and the layer. Don't worry about those for now. And we're just going to zero out the position. So make all three of these 0. X is basically horizontal, Y is vertical, and Z is forward and back. Z doesn't really matter in 2D at this point because we're going to do sorting layers, which will sort the sprites so you can put things behind each other and stuff like that. So if you go further down, you see a cube mesh filter. This is basically just kind of giving our cube its, I have no idea, shape maybe. I don't really mess with this stuff. Cube or box collider is a 3D collider, so we're going to right click, remove that, and then mesh render is basically just rendering our mesh and giving us a cube, which just looks like a 2D square to us right now. And then it's material. Material, you can't really change this one, it's just standard material that is on all the 3D objects, so you can leave that for now. But we want a 2D collider on here, so it actually collides with stuff. So you can click add component, and it looks like I already searched something up. But anyway, you can go to physics 2D, and you'll see you have the box collider 2D right here. So if you click that, it'll add it, and it has the size X and Y, which is good. And you can also edit and stuff. But if you go up here and hit Gizmos, you'll see that because we're selected on the player, it has a green outline, which is its collider. And if you go to scene, you'll see it here as well. Maybe not. No, not really, because it's kind of overlapped, but that's okay. So if we go back into the game view, everything is good. We don't really need to change much. It is it looks gray because there's no light in the scene, and that's okay, we don't really need it. Alright, so we added the box collider. We're going to quickly add another thing. So you go to add component, physics 2D, add a Rigidbody 2D. This is basically, this is just to do with the physics, so moving about and colliding with stuff. You don't need to change anything here. The gravity is at 1, so if we play this, the cube will fall very slowly, and we'll make the platform controls so it feels pretty good. But first, you can actually freeze the rotation because we don't want them rolling around. Unless you want your cube to roll around, then you can do that. Don't freeze positions. Okay, so we'll save this just in case, you know. And we'll go back to our script here. And what we're going to do is not an update, but actually, no, we'll do an update because it's going to be a small game and it won't be very taxing. So in the update function, we're going to do some input. So to do that, you're going to want to do an if statement and 2 parentheses and then your 2 curly braces like this. So it's a block of code that we're going to, you know, if something happens, then we're going to do what's ever between these curly braces. So we want to do if, I think in Unity it's input dot, yeah, okay, so input dot get key, So like that, and then in between those parentheses, because get key is a function, key code, not key and then semicolon, but key code dot, and we'll do D. So D will be our right. So for this, if I remember, we can do we can do transform dot position and then equals new vector 3. So transform, basically you can just type like transform, because the code isn't finished. So you can do transform, which will give you access to position, the rigid body, all this different stuff, and a few functions and stuff like that. Transform is basically it's the object, but you can also access game object, which is basically the same thing. It just gives you access to a few different things, and then you can do dot transform, which is the same thing as writing transform dot whatever. So just writing transform dot position gives us access to the position of the object, and we're going to make it equal to a new vector 3, which is a position. So it goes x, y, z, like that. So we're going to do our x first, and we want to do, if it works the same, I think it's different than GameMaker. So x is going to be positive in this case, so we're going to do move speed, and then y, we don't want it to move on the y, so we're going to do, we're going to make another variable actually. So what we're going to do is another public one so we can see it in the inspector and access it in different scripts if needed. We're going to make this a Rigidbody 2D, make sure it's 2D because this is a 2D game, and then my RB for Rigidbody. So a quick thing you can do is, if this was private, you can go into the start here and do my RB is equal to get component and then 2 little alligator mouths. Get component Rigidbody 2D, and then outside the alligator mouth you do 2 parentheses and a semicolon. So what this does is it's basically, if our player object has a rigid body on it, then it will set this rigid body to that variable right off the start. And we'll go into scripts here, and we're going to drag our script onto this object, and now you can see there's the move speed, but the invalid expression term. Where are we at here? Oh, here we go. Oh, that's what it is. Okay, so we're just going to comment that out. And quick tip, most people know this, but 2 slashes, forward slashes is a comment, and you can write whatever you want in here and it will not be read by the computer. So we're going to comment that out real quick. And now if we go back into Unity, it's going to compile here, you can see, and now our variable will show up. So if we play this, it sets the rigid body to it automatically. If you don't want to do that, you can always drag the rigid body in there, and now it's just there. And we'll take this out. You can do this with pretty much any variable, so like move speed is equal to 10.0, or you can just do F. And since it's a float, you need to have that F on the end. An integer is just, just a number like that. You probably wouldn't want to make it that big though. A float is any number followed by the letter F. You can also do decimals. Integers can't do decimals, so remember that. A bool is true or false. So, I don't know, fun equals false. That's what a bool would be. And they're very useful, and we'll probably use a lot of them. But yeah, so that's basically that. So what we're going to do is go back in here, move speed, and then we want to do myrb.velocity.y. So if our player is falling or jumping, you can move left and right while that's happening. And then Z, you just want to do 0, because we don't want it to move in the 0. And then Control K and then Control D, and it'll format your code for you, make it look nice. And we'll go back in here. And something we're going to want to do is probably turn off the gravity scale. So gravity scale, we'll set that to 0 right here. And play this, and our player should not fall. Yeah, okay. So, first thing. So you need to set a move speed. If it's 0, obviously it's not going to move. So we'll set this to 2. And now, look at that. Now our guy moved. So if input.getKey, we want to do plus equals maybe. It's been a while since I've done any platform stuff with Unity, but yeah, there we go. So it's very fast. So what we can try to do is basically time this, or multiply this by time dot delta time. It's just, okay, so that'll compile, and we'll see if this is any better. Yeah, there we go. So now we got this guy sliding across the screen very slowly. You can multiply move speed by 2, and there you go. It moves a bit faster, and multiply by 2 again. There we go. Now he's moving. All right. So now we can do this with our left. We want to go left now. So basically the same thing. Input.getKey, keycode.a. Transform.position is minus equal new vector 3, move speed, myrb.velocity.y, and again 0, and times it by time.delta time. Now because this is minus equal, I'm assuming it'll go in the other direction. We might have to set move speed to 0 or negative, or put a negative sign in front of the move speed variable, but no, okay. So there you go. There's our left and right, which is generally the basic directions on a platformer. But yeah, there's our left and right. So very quickly, because I am coming up on half an hour, we'll do a. Actually, I don't think so. That'll probably be for next video. But okay, so there's our basic control now. So what we'll do is we'll make a 3D object, another cube, and this cube isn't. Okay, there's. Oh, I didn't know that happened. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna 0 this out again, but we're gonna make the y a bit lower. I want to make this 1.4 or 1.5 in the y. As you can see, you can change the scale of an object. So there's the x, y, and z. You don't really need to change the z because it does not it won't affect anything really. But I'm gonna make this longer in the x, and we'll actually just set it to 18. Again, get rid of the box collider, add a box collider 2D, and once it'll snap to the entire size of the object, which is pretty handy. You don't need to add a rigid body because we don't want it to move. If you want it to move, we'll go over platform types in a different video. But so we'll go to player and set its gravity scale to 1 again. So now he can move, and there you go. So he collides with the platform. You can see there's a little black line between them. That's just collider stuff, but it moves, and here we go. So that's basically the simple movement. And you know what? We will do a jump thing in this video just because I want to give you guys a bit of a start on stuff. So what we need to do is we need to go into the player, and I'm going to use the scene view for this, and we're going to zoom in on the player, and you can, if you're selected on it, it'll have this blue line across the hierarchy. My bad. What you want to do is go, while this is selected, go to create empty child, and now there's a child object attached to the player, and it's just called game object. But you're going to want to call this ground check, just like that. Make sure it's zeroed out. If you change the position of this, it'll be relative to the parent object, not the center of the level. So that's that. We need to go back into Visual Studio, make a couple more variables. So we'll do public float jump speed. Jump speed doesn't really make sense. It's just what I usually call it. Jump force would probably make more sense, but oh well. And then you need to do public transform this time, ground check. So the transform is going to be the ground check object that we just made. So yeah, that's that. And then we're going to do public float. Actually, we'll make this one private. So we're not going to be able to see this one. Private float ground radius. So the radius of which we can actually detect that there's ground, that we're touching the ground, and we can jump again. And then we want to do, let's see, ground radius. You want to do public layer mask. What is ground? So this is basically, a layer mask is something that we can tell our player that, that is what ground is. So you'll see it here, what is ground, and it says nothing. And if you click on this, you'll see everything default, transparent FX, ignore raycast, water, and UI. So none of this is what we want. So what we need to do is go to the cube that we made for the floor here, which is this one here, and we'll change it to, I don't know, floor, just because it's the only floor we have in the game right now. So you'll see that there's tags here, which we don't really need to mess with right now. And then you'll see that there's layers. And you can add a layer, and it gives you a bunch of different empty boxes, and you can't really change these ones. I'm not sure why these are built-in layer. Okay, never mind. So we're going to make layer 8. We're going to call this ground. So now that is in there. We can go back to the floor object here and go up to layer again, and you'll see that there's ground. So if you go to the player, and there's what is ground. I'll close these so you can see it a bit better. There's our what is ground variable, and you can change this to say ground. And there'll be a little check mark there. So what that means is you can basically select multiple of these, and if you hit everything, then you can jump off everything that's in there. But we just want it to be ground. And you got to make sure the floor is set to ground, so we know that that is ground. And then our player, one variable up, it says ground check. You can basically drag the ground check object into that spot. Jump speed, we will make this 12. I'm just guessing, with the values here. So those are set, and we have it in here. Oh, and this is when we'll use a bool, or a boolean. So what a boolean is, it's a variable that can only return true or false. So it's good for if we want to say, hey, I'm on the ground, or if I'm on the ground. That's a bad example. If I'm touching the ground, set the boolean to true. If I'm in the air, set it to false, because we don't want to be able to jump continuously, because then it just jumps straight out of the level, and it won't be any fun. So public bool is short for boolean. It's just how it works in Visual Studio. Forget how it works in JavaScript. I'm assuming it's pretty much the same. Public bool grounded. Okay, I gotta spell it right. Grounded. So we're not going to set it to anything yet, but in our update, so let's add some comments. So add a comment, call that moving, and then we'll do jumping. So now this is our moving code, and this will be our jumping code. So jumping, we want to do grounded is equal to physics, and I'll explain this in a second. Physics 2D dot overlap circle. So our vector 2 point is going to be our ground check, So ground check, and because it's a transform, we can just go dot position, and that's what it's asking for. It's asking for position to basically reference from, and then our radius is going to be ground radius. Okay, and as you can, I'm pointing at it with my finger, assuming you guys can see, but it's not the case. So you'll see here, when I'm circling, there's a 1 of 4 and 2 little arrows going up and down. If you hit the arrow keys, you can scroll through those and basically see what parameters you can put in this. So if we go to 2 of 4, you'll see that there's now an int layer mask. So what we can set that to is, what is ground? And that's our layer mask that we made up here. So now it's saying grounded is equal to our physics 2D overlap circle. So it's overlapping, if our ground check is overlapping a certain radius, so our ground check overlapping a certain radius on objects that we want. So what is ground? Obviously ground. So now we want some input to say, we're jumping, and if we can jump. So what you need to do is if, and then we're gonna do if grounded. Oops. You can go like this. So if grounded, and this will be a nested if statement, basically meaning an if statement in an if statement. So if grounded, we can do if input, input dot get key. You want to do get key down. You don't want to be able to hold it. Get key down. Actually, let's do get key up. So this is basically if the key is released. So if you press the space bar and you release the space bar, then the player will go up. So get key up, key code again, dot space, so space bar. So now it's gonna go through here and it's gonna say if grounded, and then if this is true, then it will move down to here. And now if you get the key, you hit space, then we wanna do some sort of jumping code here. So now, and because we have our grounded in the update function and it updates every frame, it will update every frame. So if we're off the ground, it'll say it's false, and if we're on the ground, it'll be true. So you don't have to worry about really setting that to true or false. Okay, so we want to do transform.position plus equals new vector 3, and we're going to do my rigidbody.velocity.x. So if we're moving left and right, then that's fine. Or let's just set that to 0. And then we want to do jump speed, and then 0 in the z. And we'll times this by time dot delta time. So what I'm thinking is here, if it's transformed up position plus equals new vector 3, we're basically adding the velocity, but we don't want to add that velocity. So we're going to set these to 0. I'm just kind of going over this in my head right now. Okay, so let's go back into here. Everything should be set. Okay, so our grounded variable shows up here because I did make it public. So once we're on the ground, that should be, it should say true. Oh, did I didn't even set a ground radius. Okay, so private, we're going to set this to public actually. Public ground radius. So we'll go back in here. And this will pop up here, and we can make this 1 will be okay, I think. Might be a bit big. Yeah, you can see that the jump isn't right, but you can see that we're moving. So what is ground? Everything's good, and the kind of works, but we're gonna divide that by 2, so 0.5, and we're gonna go up to 24, just to see if we can get it jumping up higher. Oh, the ground radius is too small. Oh, actually, you know what I forgot to do? If you go up to the player, you can select the player and hit F, and it will zoom in. You can go to ground check here, and there's a little, in the inspector right here, there's a little cube with a drop down. You can press that, set it to a different color, so now you can see it. And then you can select the move tool here. And we're going to move this to the bottom of the player, just like that. So now, turn off Gizmos because I don't want to see that really. If we set this to 0.2, it'll be a lot more precise. It's got a funny And now you can move, and if you let go of the left or right key, it'll stop moving in the air, which is kind of not what we want, but we'll do. We can always fix it later. Okay, and we want this to be. We're gonna set this to equal to new vector 3, and we'll see what that does. Because we want it to. Nah. Okay. Might just need to set this to a large variable, or we can just do a whole different chunk of code for this, which is what we'll do right now. So what we'll do is go myrb.velocity equal to new vector 2. Velocity is, well, you should know what velocity is. It's a physics thing. It's, okay, so new vector 2, so I want to do x and y. So myrb.velocity.x and then jump speed. So whatever our x velocity is, and then our jump speed. And that should work, I hope. I'm not a huge fan of the 2D physics in Unity, but oh, there we go. That actually worked pretty well. Okay, so go back here. We'll make this 12 again. Because everything's, yeah, there we go. And the reason it looks kind of odd and he's like floating is because our gravity scale is really low. So if you go into our Rigidbody here and you set the gravity scale to something like 6, then he'll have a bit more of a drop, and we can change our jump speed to something a bit higher, and there you go. And he has this little bit of, it looks like he's getting squished when he lands, so that kind of adds a bit of bit of something. And then we can also just up the move speed. Yeah, there we go. So that's basic controls for right now. We'll definitely mess with this a lot more to set it for our game. But this is our basic kind of controls for left, right, and jump in Unity. It's just dealing with positions and stuff like that. A little bit of physics stuff. So that is basically the first part in this. I think next time we'll go over some more maybe engine stuff, so setting up some different things, some more programming stuff, maybe do some art stuff. I want to make a whole episode on art because I know that's a big, people want to learn how to do art. But yeah, hope this was a bit helpful. I know it's pretty basic stuff, but it's getting started right away, and how I usually make games. This is what I do to get started. So yeah, thank you for watching, and the next episode will be sometime within the week. I'm hoping. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later.